Today's episode of Off the Timeline is titled The Day the South Took College Football. October 1973, Knoxville, Tennessee, in an alternate universe. ABC executives can barely hear each other inside Neyland Stadium. 100,000 fans shaking the building, orange everywhere. The camera pans across the crowd as Tennessee lines up against Alabama on national TV. And standing in the backfield is Archie Griffin, not in scarlet and gray, in Tennessee orange. The crowd erupts as Griffin breaks down the sideline. The announcer almost sounds stunned. I think we're watching the center of college football move south. At the time, that sounded absurd. For generations, the emotional power of college football lived in places like Columbus, South Bend, and Ann Arbor. The South had passion, but it didn't control the sport nationally, not culturally, not commercially. But according to one alternate history, all that changed because of a single recruiting visit in 1971. And that sets the table for the lock. In real history, Archie Griffin was never supposed to leave Ohio, especially not in the early 70s. Recruiting wasn't national back then. No internet, no ESPN, no ranking shows. And if Woody Hayes wanted a player from Ohio, that player usually became a Buckeye. And Archie Griffin seemed perfect for Ohio State. Quiet, disciplined, and efficient. Exactly the kind of player Woody Hayes built dynasties around. Most people considered his recruitment over before it started, but in Knoxville, a young Tennessee coach saw something much larger than a running back, and that sets the table for the gamble. In 1971, Bill Battle was only in his early 30s, young by SEC standards, still trying to prove himself. Tennessee football already mattered deeply in the South, but Battle understood something many other coaches didn't fully grasp yet. TV was changing college football, regional walls were starting to disappear. And if Tennessee could land a superstar from Ohio, it wouldn't just improve the roster, it would change perception. So Battle took a chance. He went after Archie Griffin. People around the sport thought it was ridiculous. Why would the best player in Ohio leave the Midwest? Why would anyone willingly say no to Woody Hayes? But Tennessee got Archie Griffin to visit Knoxville, and that's where history splits. And that sets the table for the visit. Years later, people around Tennessee football would talk about the visit almost like folklore, because Tennessee didn't recruit Archie Griffin like another player, they recruited him like family. His mother was included in conversations. Academic advisors spoke with the family directly. Coaches talked openly about injuries, life after football, future careers. One question reportedly changed everything. Archie's mother asked, if he gets hurt, what happens to him? At Tennessee, the room became quiet. The coaches answered carefully, seriously. At Ohio State, the atmosphere felt different. Not cruel, not evil, just older, more rigid, more assumed. At Ohio State, football was the future. At Tennessee, football was part of the future. And in this alternate history, the emotional difference changes the entire sport. Because Archie Griffin commits to Tennessee and college football changes drastically. And that sets the table for the South going national. The reaction was immediate. Ohio newspapers called it betrayal. Southern newspapers called it revolution. Because suddenly, the SEC had something it had never fully possessed before, a nationally marketable star. Archie Griffin becomes appointment television. He's impossible to dislike, and ABC aggressively pushes Tennessee broadcast nationally, and slowly, America starts seeing Southern football differently, not as regional football, but as the emotional center of the sport. That changes everything. Recruits in Ohio, Pennsylvania, and Michigan begin watching Tennessee every Saturday, and for the first time, the Midwest begins losing psychological ownership of college football, not overnight, but visibly. And that sets the table for the weakness in the empire. Ohio State doesn't collapse. That's important. They still win, still recruit, still matter. But something subtle changes. For decades, Ohio State felt inevitable. Now, they feel vulnerable. And Woody Hayes feels it, not publicly, not dramatically, but internally. Because Tennessee isn't just winning football games, they're changing what college football looks like. Meanwhile, Georgia becomes obsessed with catching up. Repeated Tennessee dominance pushes Georgia boosters into desperation. The Bulldogs modernized years earlier than they did in real life, with advanced scouting, national recruiting, organized booster systems, sports psychology, and aggressive TV branding. In trying to catch Tennessee, Georgia accidentally creates the blueprint for the modern SEC machine. And then the ripple effect spreads west. all the way to Washington. And that sets the table for the Rose Bowl revelation. At Washington, they study Tennessee obsessively, not to imitate them, but to understand why they're winning. They see SEC speed, Big Ten discipline, emotional intensity, and TV awareness. And he merges those ideas with West Coast innovation. Washington becomes something entirely new, balanced, modern, national, which brings us to Pasadena in 1975. Washington versus Ohio State. Not just another football game, not just another Rose Bowl, but a symbolic transfer of power. As Washington dismantles Ohio State, Woody Hayes watches a version of football that no longer fully belongs to the Midwest. Halfway through the game, one broadcaster says, "This doesn't look like Big Ten football anymore," because it isn't. The sport evolved, and all traces back to one recruiting visit in Knoxville. And that sets the table for the sport changing. By the 80s, the ripple effects are impossible to ignore. The SEC expands nationally, TV money accelerates, Southern recruiting grows, and the Big Ten slowly realizes something terrifying. College football no longer emotionally belongs to them, not nationally, not culturally, not commercially. At a coaching convention in the early 80s, Woody Hayes watches presentations on modern offensive flexibility and national recruiting infrastructure. The room applauds. Woody reportedly mutters, "That's not football." A younger assistant quietly replies, "Coach, it is now." In real history, Archie Griffin became an Ohio State legend. Two Heismans, but alternate history isn't really about what did happen. It's about understanding how fragile history actually is. One visit, one conversation, one family feeling respected somewhere different. And suddenly, Tennessee becomes the center of the sport. Georgia becomes a modernization machine. Washington modernizes football. And Ohio State loses its aura. Maybe the South didn't take college football overnight. Maybe it started with one recruit quietly leaving Ohio. And if you enjoyed this alternate history, like, comment, and subscribe, and let me know what other recruiting decision could have changed college football forever. And I will see you in the next timeline.